Hey everyone, I'm super excited today to have you join us for the first episode ever of the HX podcast. This is something we've been working on with my new firm, HX Research, that just launched here last week. And as our very first guest on the HX podcast, the very first thing we've done publicly is HX Research. Of course, my first guest is my old friend, my colleague, my brother in arms, Whitney Tilson. Whitney, how are you? How you doing? Are you safe? First off, you've had some crazy travels here in the last 36 hours or something.
Anyone who's read my recent daily will know I've been to 7 countries in the last 6 days. I'm currently talking to you from Israel, and I had a near miss bringing drones for Ukraine in through Moldova, and the Moldovans, it turned out, didn't like that very much, so they seized my drones and I had to skedaddle out of town pretty quick. So it's quite a story you can read in my daily. So good.
I think that's one of those things that in retrospect, if you sort of took that sentence, I was taking drones to the Ukraine through Moldova and just sort of took it in a vacuum, you'd be like, you may run into some problems there. So I'm, I'm glad to see you're okay. I saw your messages. I got to admit, I was a little worried. You've got 9 lives and you don't have run into any problems, but that was a little scary. That was a little scary.
I had my friend Senator Cory Booker and the U.S. Embassy, working it, and this created sort of a national incident in Moldova, because apparently nobody had tried to do this before and the Moldovans were freaking out. So most importantly, I got out, and now the Ukrainians are like, all right, Moldova, give us our drones.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good. I'm glad you're safe. Look, let me start with something. Whitney and I have known each other for a couple decades. 5-6 years ago, Whitney had joined Stansberry Research and came to me and said, this is what I'm doing. And it was the first time I had really learned about Stansberry and the newsletter business, and I was just blown away. I said, wow, that sounds fucking awesome. The ability to take the experience that we have on Wall Street, everything we've learned, and share it with regular people and really bring that message out there. And so we formed, Whitney formed a little bit before I got there, but I joined shortly thereafter Empire, and had a great ride across the last 5 years. Stansberry, market-wise, the parent company, was very lucky. Porter Stansberry, the founder, who's a fucking legend, came back last year, and Porter gave Whitney an incredible opportunity to go out and run the flagship newsletter there, Stansberry Investment Advisory. At the same time, I was looking at a bunch of opportunities there as we sort of went through this transition, and eventually I went to Porter and said, hey man, I'd love to take the mission statement of Empire and move it forward as my own firm, HX Research. And so, I know there's been a few communications back and forth in the last 3 months. All this has really happened in 3-4 months, but I think it's just an absolute win-win. Whitney gets to lead this flagship publication, has a great team he'll talk about in a second. We're launching HX, which I'll talk about in just a bit. But yeah, Whitney, I'm super excited for what both of us are doing in this situation.
Yeah, it was great to see Porter come back in and reassume control of MarketWise. And basically, the reason the business has been so successful is he always puts the subscribers and their interests first. And, frankly, MarketWise had probably grown too big too quickly, was spread too thin. And so we really consolidated things, and that involved basically merging Empire in with the flagship Stansberry Research franchise that had launched the entire business, Porter Stansberry at his kitchen table, 25 years ago or so. Stansberry Research was missing a leader because Porter had left and now become CEO of the whole company. But it had and has an incredible team of 5 analysts and And it's a much bigger operation than Empire was. So we felt like it was best for the business, but also best for our subscribers. So both the Stansberry subscribers would benefit from having me join to lead the team, but also the Empire subscribers who would come along with me and receive basically equivalent Stansberry research products to what they were getting at Empire, but would benefit from me having a team of 5 experienced analysts. So it's been a win-win, for me personally, but most importantly for our subscribers. And it was the right business decision as well. So it all came together. And we're delighted to be working with you, operating independently. And as you'll be discussing, of course. Our old Empire subscribers are going to be able to get you, which is what they paid for, back when they joined Empire.
Well, and I think that's where this really worked out great, is what happens is Whitney's able to carry forward. You're able to carry forward with that Stansberry franchise. You have a lot more firepower behind you. And what I've done is I basically have recreated, a lot of what we did at Empire, Empire Elite Trader, Empire Elite Income. I've got a product called HX Legacy, which is a combination of Empire Elite Growth and Empire Investment Report. And, there's an offer that went out today, a little bit earlier today, to the former Empire subscribers, where at HX Research, we will honor all subscriptions that existed at Empire Financial. So, there's an offer out there. You can also check us out at daily.hxresearch.net. But we're going to honor all those subscriptions. If you paid, and a lot of lifetime partners paid thousands of dollars to have access to Whitney and I for, as long as we're going to be doing this, you still have that opportunity. You have that opportunity via the credit with Stansberry, and you have the opportunity with us honoring those subscriptions. So check us out. Again, a couple of emails have gone out where I've been in Whitney's Daily. You can also email us at info@hxresearch.net. And before we start, I do want to point out my kitchen is about 25 feet away. So I didn't quite start it at the kitchen table like Porter, but it's pretty close here. So, I thought I'd kick off. Whitney, you and I have talked a little bit, but I've been busy starting this business. You've obviously been busy gallivanting the world to an extent. I want to talk a little bit about 2024 outlook. This is something that we often did when we started the year, sort of have a roundtable. Let's kick it off. What do you think happens to the markets here? Great year last year. Decent January. We're a couple days past it. Market's getting hit a little bit today. What are your thoughts? How does this play out in 2024?
Yeah, well, Enrique, I learned from you. One of the most important things I learned from you, years ago, and one of the reasons I invited you to come in and join Empire is I my training was at the feet of Warren Buffett and Charlie Munger, and particularly Charlie, were sort of curmudgeonly value guys, and always thought there was calamity looming around the corner and so forth. And you correctly pointed out, look, markets go up over time. 8 out of 10 years, the markets are going to be up. And so don't fall in. It's always intellectually tempting to believe the bearish argument, and the gloom and doom argument always sounds more intellectually appealing, especially if you come from an old school value training like I did. And the biggest mistake I made in 18 years as a hedge fund manager was on a number of occasions, particularly post the global financial crisis, just sort of being bearish and having my investing ship, battening down the hatches and trimming the sails when the skies, in fact, were sunny. So with that as background, I look out today and, the jobs report we got last Friday, and in fact, the economic news over the past couple of years, we have had 2 full years of historically low unemployment rate, below 4%, inflation, which spiked up over 9%, and the Fed commenced an unprecedented tightening, and 100% of economists predicted a recession as the tightening would slow down the economy and kill inflation. In fact, and look what has happened. The absolute best case scenario has happened, which is inflation is, I would argue, an absolute non-issue. It's back down around 3%. There's no sign it's coming back. Yet the unemployment rate is every single month under 4% for 2 consecutive years as the inflation has come down. Absolutely nobody predicted that dream scenario. Then you look at productivity gains, wage gains are outpacing inflation. So the average American, not just rich people for the first time in 40 years, are actually doing better and outpacing
Blue
inflation.
collar wage great gains are actually doing very well.
You
I
bet.
want to. This is not doesn't get highlighted a lot. Is that this has been the biggest boom in blue collar jobs, job
Yes.
growth and wages that we've probably seen in
Yes.
30
And,
years. I mean,
and
it's
and
nuts, and no one
U.S.
talks about it.
construction spending has gone absolutely through the roof, thanks to the CHIPS Act and the infrastructure, so forth, and companies, because of all the geopolitical turmoil in China, the wars in Israel and Ukraine. Like, just generally, there's reshoring going on. The trend that just decimated union blue collar jobs in the Midwest and so forth, those trends are reversing in a big way, and that's benefiting a broad swath of middle America, right? And then you look at any economic number you want to look at from pre-COVID to today in terms of GDP growth, inflation,
Yeah.
unemployment, et cetera. We're doing better than basically any other country on earth. I mean, look at China sucking wind in a big way, and Europe's recovery has been much slower than the U.S. recovery. In light of that fairly rosy picture, it's not surprising that stocks, despite much higher interest rates, stocks are basically at all-time highs today. So the question, though, is look, should we start to get nervous? It's time to take a lot of money off the table. And getting back to the original point I made, that something you taught me years ago is look, when the skies are still sunny, you got to make hay when the sun is shining, right? Once every 5 or 10 years, we get into bubble territory, or there's some looming calamity,
Yeah.
and I try to anticipate that.
Financial crisis of some
Exactly.
sort. Yeah.
Like I absolutely nailed the internet bubble. I absolutely nailed the housing bubble. Not to the day or to the month, but generally speaking, I got defensive at the right time. I can't claim to have predicted COVID in advance, but you and I, literally the day the market bottomed on March 23rd or March 24th of 2000, you and I pulled together a video sort of like this, just pounding the table, saying this is a generational
Yeah.
buying opportunity, certainly the best since the bottom
I
of the
hate
global
to
financial
say
crisis.
in the context of COVID, I would hate to ever say something like we handled it
Yeah.
excellently, but in terms of giving investment, not advice,
Yeah.
but like kind of guiding people,
Yeah.
we handled
Yeah,
it very well. I think
in
we had a
fairness
great
and
call.
appropriate humility, we did not tell people to sell everything and go to cash 6 weeks earlier, but we
Yeah,
did
yeah,
not
yeah.
panic in the decline, and the market fell 35% in 6 weeks, fastest decline ever. But we kept our heads about us and went all in with like to the hour that it bottomed, and
Yeah.
then you and I have both stayed pretty constructive. As I like your word, constructive / bullish, ever since.
I was gonna say I see you borrowed that from
Yes.
me. So I borrowed I'm gonna go off a little tangent here. Whitney, for years and years, people would ask when I said, why does a stock go up? It's because there's more buyers than sellers. And Whitney correctly pointed out, well, there's always the equal amount of buyers and sellers. I likewise gave Whitney two things that he uses now. The concept of constructive when
Yes.
talking about the market. The other one too, which we use a lot for HX, is you joke, Whitney, that when people used to ask you what kind of investor you are, you would say a value investor. I think you asked me that when we first met, and I said, look, I'm a make money investor.
Right.
I'm here to make money. If it's a bad market, I need to make money. If it's a great market, I need to make money. And we've used that saying for HX across the board. So it sounds like that's kind of your mode. You're constructive.
Yeah, I mean, look,
it's
again, I can't tell people, I can't say that at the beginning of 2022, I told everybody to go to cash, right? I was just like, hang on, we're in a bull market here. 2022 was a painful correction of some excesses among meme stocks and SPACs, and just general tech and growth stocks sort of got ahead of themselves. I think sort of the whole Cathie Wood complex of stocks really took a hit. But I was a year ago, or I'd say 13, 14 months ago,
Yep.
I got super bullish, pounding the table again on big cap tech. Meta was my favorite. I wrote a 6-part series when it was at $95. It's up 5x since then.
Yep. Yep.
And so
October of 22.
yeah,
I remember that. Like the consensus. It's funny you talk about consensus because that consensus of 100% of people expecting a recession
yes,
or economist was
yes,
like the
eh,
biggest tell. Meta
yeah,
was the other one. When you wrote
yeah.
that, because I was banging the table too, there was like everyone thought Meta was going out of business.
It
Like
was,
it was just insane what was
yeah, and
happening
I was
there.
like, yeah, I just, I was, I mean, at the bottom, even with Mark Zuckerberg pissing away tens of billions of dollars on the metaverse and renaming his company and that foolishness and so forth, the subscriber numbers, the engagement numbers were still going up 8% a
Yeah.
year around the world. The company was still minting money. They just had crummy capital allocation, which is an easily fixable problem. And by the way, speaking of which, you just saw they just announced a small dividend. The stock went up 20% in a day because that was evidence of improved capital
He
allocation going forward.
Zuckerberg gets like $50 million a year. I posted something which I lifted from someone else. I forget who. Maybe it was Bespoke. Is like everyone loves to hate the Meta products,
Yeah,
like oh Facebook this,
right.
Instagram that. And I'm like, what would happen if people actually liked the Meta products that they use all the time and spend all this money on? The stock would be a $6 trillion market cap instead, or something
Right.
like
It's
that.
I've
So,
long said Google
um,
and Facebook are two of the world's greatest businesses. In fact, Warren Buffett said that. I picked that up from him 5 years ago at the Berkshire annual meeting, and I've been bullish on both those stocks to this day. Meta had a very painful drawdown that sort of reminded me of Netflix back from 2010 to
okay,
2012. When it
yep.
went down by 80%, about the same that Meta went down, and those were astonishing buying opportunities when you find a great company that has self-inflicted wounds. In the case of Netflix back then, for youngsters out there, they launched this silly thing called Quickster, and they tried to separate their old DVD by mail business and all, and it was just a total ridiculous unforced error that pissed off their customers. But because it was self-inflicted. All they had to do was stop punching themselves in the
Yeah, it was
face.
unwinded.
That's
Yeah,
exactly
yeah.
what Mark Zuckerberg stopped doing, punching himself in the face, and lo and behold, the stock goes up 5x in a little over a year.
So let me ask you a question because I got this question on social a little bit. I'm more active on social on Twitter than you. When we sat down, Porter came back in October, and I remember sitting through. You've known Porter for decades. I've only known him a little bit, and he was gone a lot of the time I was at Empire. And I'll tell you, every conversation I've had with the guy, I'm just blown away. Like his acumen, like, and especially in this business, he understands this business like no one I've ever seen. It's like talking to Michael Jordan about basketball or something. But he got up there and he was just like, boom, like this is coming, and I'm just like sitting there going, holy shit. Like he was, I don't want to say he's negative. Well, he is negative, but it seemed like he's just more concerned that there's a real crisis looming or something like that. I mean, so now you work with him a lot more
Yeah.
closely, obviously because he's back. How would you juxtapose what Porter's viewpoint, and I only know Porter's viewpoint from having seen it from the outside, how would you juxtapose sort of your viewpoint and Porter's
Yeah,
relatively?
well, it's sort of funny. Porter owns a lot of guns, and I think he has a little bit of a, canned goods and go to a cave with your guns because the world's coming to an end than
Yeah.
I do. But here's what,
I think he calls his Baltimore house is called the farm
yeah,
too, so that
yeah.
kind of feels sort
No,
of
I've been
it's beautiful,
yeah,
it's
and I've been
beautiful,
out there
but
shooting with him. But here's what I would say. I mean, Porter, as far back as must have been almost a decade ago, did this video that I don't know ended up having tens of millions of views called "The End of America" or something like that. And it turned out to be completely wrong. But here's the thing. Porter didn't tell everybody to sell all their stocks and
yeah,
all.
yeah, yeah,
His
yeah.
advice, if you believe that there's going to be inflation, that we're spending recklessly, that the dollar's going to debase, is his investment strategy is to own blue chip brand name companies that have
Yeah.
pricing power. And, 10, 15 years ago, he recommended Hershey's, one of the world's great businesses. He recommended Microsoft as one of the core holdings for 10 years in Stansberry's investment advisory that I now helm. So, in other
Yep.
words, even though Porter got the macros wrong, His investment advice was similar to mine, which is own quality blue chip stocks for the long run, and that's been exactly right. And his subscribers who followed him have done great, and the subscribers who followed me have also done great.
Well, it's interesting. I think that when you look at the products that we've launched, so because there's a real look. I think HX is just an evolution on what we were doing with Empire, and fitting with Stansberry is kind of a great fit, because what we had at Empire, like the franchises that I run, Trader and Income, were make money in any market. So, Trader, I think we had 76 recommendations in 2022. They were all long. We had a 75% hit rate. We were up 9% on an absolute basis, with the S&P down 20, the NASDAQ down 30. The point is, if you're trading right, traders make money. If they're good traders and trading strategies, they make money in any market. On the other side, I think that the blue chip strategies that you guys have are sort of the strategies that get through. And we have, like with what we're doing with HX Legacy, it's taking some parts of growth, but some parts of Empire Investment Report. And it's really what I did at my old hedge fund, where I was paid to make money long in any market. Right. So, look, if the market's down 30%, you're running a long-term portfolio. It's not like you're going to be up a lot, but at least you can do a lot better. So it sounds like you guys really have built an evergreen portfolio to deal with, the constructive world that maybe you see, or a more, I won't say apocalyptic, crisis potential world that Porter sees. Is that a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's right. We have a range of products at Stansberry Research, and a range of writers / editors / gurus, whatever you want to call us. So I'm sort of helming the Stansberry's Investment Advisory, which for those of you viewers at Empire, former Empire members, that would have been the equivalent of our flagship Empire Stock Investor, the kind of stocks I would put in my parents' retirement account. And that's always been really mostly the kind of investor that I've been. That's sort of my core forte. And, I owned Berkshire Hathaway for 20 plus years, and that kind of thing. And actually, again, I would say the second biggest mistakes I made in my 18 years of running a hedge fund was I didn't do a good enough job of letting my winners run. I would, I don't know, I was either sleep deprived or had read some bearish report, or some short seller was out there. And, I own some of the great...
Being a bear is sexy, man. Like people, it's got sex appeal. That's how I say it.
It can be very seductive. I was long Netflix, and it doubled, and it doubled again, and it doubled again, on its way up 90x. But some of the smartest short sellers I knew were shorting it, and so they sort of scared me out. And I still made 7x. Hard to complain about 7x, but in the investing world, if you stumble in, if you some combination of being lucky and good, and you get you don't get very many 10 baggers. In a lifetime, you don't get very many 90 bagger in 8 years from the bottom. When I went on national television and said, Netflix is this decade's Amazon. And at that point, the prior decade, Amazon had been a 20 bagger. And it turns out I was too conservative. Netflix, in less than a decade, in 8 years, went up 90x. And that should have been a career maker. All I had to do was sit on my ass. And instead, I listened to the short sellers, and I didn't want to be greedy. No. In investing, you better be greedy.
And by the way, Amazon was that decade's Amazon.
And Amazon did it again. It was another 20 bagger. Right.
No, I think, it's something that, it's so sexy to be negative. It feeds into our psychology. I talk a lot about psychology, but one of my favorite sayings is, in order for a stock to go up fivefold, it has to double first. So, one of the things that I look at a lot of different ways of looking at stocks. Sometimes I start by saying, what's doubled in the last 3 years? Because that shows me a company that is showing growth, that does have momentum, operational momentum, et cetera. Well, I want to come back to the outlook here for a second, because, I think what Porter has pointed out, or where because I have read a lot of his stuff. It's really interesting. Is I think that we just HX Daily started publishing last week. I know you signed up. I know you've been
Yeah.
traveling, so I don't know if you've read them yet. We put out our market outlook part one and
Yeah.
part two, and one of the things that I think is interesting is that there's two concepts. One, there's this whole concept of, is this time different? And, in general, I don't think any time is different. This one's been pretty different, though, because, as I say in the report, in the daily, we had COVID, and what we did in COVID to the global economy, we've never done before. I sure as hell hope we never do again. But I think a lot of the traditional signals that we used before, we just weren't used to. And I joke about like taking a car engine and throwing it into a frozen lake, letting it freeze in a block of ice, and then thawing it out. It'll probably still work, but it's going to do some weird shit for a while. And where I'm fascinated by this market is I could, the fact is the market through history averages up 8% or something like that, the S&P 500. But it almost never is up 8%. Like that happens less than 10% of the time. Is it up between a positive 5 and 10%? I want to say is like 14% of occurrences. So the market has a much broader dispersion. And I think we're in an interesting spot right now where I am also constructive, but I almost feel like there's a good chance of a bubble reflate as well as a good chance of a financial crisis, and they both kind of sit there equally. Yeah. And I'll give you this one last thing. I want to hear your thoughts. I just posted something to Twitter, from Bespoke, which does fantastic work. It was the yield curve when inverted. I'm going to get the number slightly wrong, but the yield curve when inverted 466 days ago. Okay, so people may look at it and say, well, the economy's doing great, and usually for our listeners, yield curve inversion when the short end of the government bond curve is trading above the long end, it implies that there's going to be a recession. It's tightening credit situation. The average time before an actual recession is 548 days. And in 2006, 2007, it was like 917 days. In fact, in 2006, 2007, at the same point we are right now, the S&P went higher for 6 more months, went to all-time highs before then crashing. So I think it's a really interesting, area. And one of our sayings, and we're going to talk about this in a little bit, is either trade a lot or don't trade at all. Right. It really feels that way right now. Like I feel there's a higher likelihood of a binary outcome in the next 18 months than maybe I can recall seeing in my career. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that kind of setup?
Yeah. I guess I would say, I would say 90% of the time, I try not to have a strong opinion about the market that is influencing my stock picking. I'm a stock picker, and I don't care what market is out there at almost any time, maybe not at the very peak of the internet bubble or something, almost any time. Actually, at the very peak of the internet bubble, there were tons of value stocks. You just had to not buy the internet stocks, right? So in other words, when you're a generalist like me, who's got a lot of experience, like I can always find some cheap stocks to buy here and there. That's what I do. That's what we recommend to our readers. And we try not to advise or to behave ourselves, swinging the portfolio around from 100% invested to 0% invested or whatever. That said, somewhere every 5 to 10 years, something comes along that really shocks the market in a big way. I'm not talking about an S&P down 20% in 2022, right? Like that's just run of the mill, pullback, right?
Although it was pretty fucking brutal when you take into account the NASDAQ.
But look, anyone,
if
you're going to invest in stocks, you better be able to weather a 2022. The question is can you weather a 2008, early 09, where the S&P is down 50%, or 2000 to 2002, where the NASDAQ was down almost 80%? Like, those are the ones you hopefully can avoid and get out in time. Like when the internet bubble burst, I was just sort of buying value stocks, but I own some tech stocks that I've been riding since the late 90s. I didn't get out on March 10th of 2000, the day the NASDAQ peaked, but I sort of saw the train wreck unfolding. What happened during COVID was pretty unusual, where there was a very rapid shock to the system, right? If you go look, usually market tops to bottoms during downturns, like in the internet bubble, like in 08, 09, take place over 18 months. There was loads of time to get out when it was clear there was a massive internet bubble, when it was clear there was a massive housing bubble.
It's a process, not a moment in time.
But most of the time, look, when the skies are sunny, and right now, you can argue our debt is at unprecedented levels. You could argue China could start a hot war in Taiwan, and Russia could use nukes. There are always black swans out there. But the most important fundamentals, corporate profitability, unemployment, inflation, the major economic indicators are just astonishingly good right now. If there's anything very unusual about what has happened or so, it's that never in history has inflation soared and come down like that. And the Fed has raised interest rates like that, and we haven't had a recession. It's not just that we haven't had a recession from the inversion rate of the yield curve. So you're right, it is unusual, and I'm keeping an eye on warning signs that this thing could tip over, but I'm not seeing them now. And I think, I don't think valuations are anywhere near bubble levels. They're definitely on the high side, but they're not anywhere near bubble levels. So I think investors at this right now, until something changes, and I'm open to pivoting pretty quickly, investors should just focus on buying good quality stocks and doing good quality research like what we do and the ideas we share with our investors every month and the stuff that you recommend. And, just crank it out bottoms up, which is what you should be doing 90% of the time in your investing career anyway.
Well, it's funny you say, because a lot of these concepts in the second part of my outlook, I actually deal a lot with what I call technicals, but I was actually talking more about big market setups. And the reality is, the S&P 500 just hit a new high after a period of not hitting a new high for 300 days, 400 days, something like that. That signal by itself, and there's a whole bunch, there's 25 other signals that go around that. That is one of the most powerful signals out there in the market. When you finally hit a new high after a long time. And again, it's not that the coast is clear. There's always dangers, but this is the wall of worry, right? That's how markets go up. When we get to 100% of economists thought it was a recession, when 100% of economists are like, oh, the economy's kicking ass and the stock market's going to the moon, well, then we got to be worried. That'll be my concern. So let me shift gears a little bit. Look, when you started Empire and then when I joined, I always looked at as Empire as a mission, to be honest. It wasn't just putting research out there. The idea was both of us have been very blessed to have worked at the highest levels of Wall Street investing for, multiple decades. We got to meet incredible people, work with some of the best minds that have ever invested. And, I looked at Empire as I could be running money for CalPERS and Abu Dhabi and all that, and that's great. But I can also take all that experience and those ideas and bring it to people who wouldn't normally get it. And, the hedge funds charge 2 and 20 with a minimum of $1 million to 10 million investment. Our products cost a couple $100 or, $5,000 for a lifetime partnership. And so what I loved about that was taking that knowledge and sharing it on a day-to-day basis. And I want to say one thing too here, because this is very important. Since putting this business together, I've looked at a lot of other newsletters. What is outstanding and differentiated about what I'll call the Stansberry model is the actionable idea. And I want to emphasize that. There's a lot of newsletters out there that there's really interesting bullet points. There's this news, that news, but they don't really make you money. They're kind of like, okay, this is happening, that's happening. What I love about the strategies that we ran at Empire, that I run at HX, that you run at Stansberry, there's ideas in there. That's like buy this stock, buy it now, sell it now, etc. But I want to come back to this concept. You've done a great job of bringing this knowledge to the masses. So if you went out and you had to pick 3 to 6 snippets, sentences, sayings that you could share with your daughters, your cousin. I'm sure you get people coming up to you in airports and being like, "Oh, you're Whitney Tilson." If you just had those 3 to 6 things, what would you? I know I'm putting you on the spot here. You probably didn't have a list ready. What would be the 3 to 6 things that you would share with someone about like trading, investing, and obviously there's like, we'll hire a professional. We're going to put that one aside.
Right.
Let's say these people want to trade, they want to invest. What would you say to them?
Well, look, let me back up and just say, look, what's the end goal here? And the end goal here is financial security. That's what everybody wants. They just want to be able to have enough money to not have to worry about money. I don't aspire to have my college buddy Bill Ackman always wanted to be a billionaire and have a private jet or whatever, and that really motivated him. And he, combined with a lot of hard work, absolutely brilliant in general, just intellectually, but as an investor, and some good luck, and you throw it in there, and lo and behold, he achieved it. I don't care about that. I'm very comfortable, and I want my readers to have financial security and comfort. So how do you achieve that? I will tell you, interestingly enough, it may sound funny coming from me and given the business I'm in, which is being a brilliant investor is actually not at the top of the list to achieving financial security. My parents actually did it right. And my parents don't know anything about investing. They're hilariously ignorant about investing. My parents.
Are your parents, weren't they the first generation of the
They
Peace
were the
Corps?
third couple to meet and marry. Third couple, according to family lore. Anyway, they think they're the third couple.
So I won't call them hippies, but they're Peace Corps people.
They were
back
1960s do-gooders. They met and married within 6 weeks of meeting each other, because otherwise they were going to be assigned to different islands in the Peace Corps. So my dad hadn't even finished college. My mom was the daughter of a Seattle fireman, but both of them were inspired by Kennedy. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do. So they volunteered for the Peace Corps, were getting sent to the Philippines, got married, and have lived a life of service in international development. They've lived in. I grew up in Tanzania, Nicaragua. My parents have spent the last 28 years in Africa, 8 years in Ethiopia, last 20 years in Kenya, and so forth. So what's the advice to them? Let's talk about them. They're now in their early 80s, and they've achieved financial security, but never in their lives have they ever earned a big payday. They didn't have a big inheritance. So how have they achieved very good financial security? And I would love to say it's because, I'm a genius investor and I gave them Netflix at $8 a share. No, it's not because of that.
No, you sold the Netflix. Come on.
I know. The answer is they did everything right outside of investing, even before they got to investing. So what does that mean? No matter what your income is, so have a steady job. Okay, don't get laid off. Don't go become an Herbalife salesperson or get sucked into some silly scam or whatever. Whatever. Build a career, build knowledge, build expertise such that you are valuable to an employer. And maybe if 1% of people should go out and be entrepreneurs, but the other 99% of people should go work for somebody else. Go work for a company that gives you benefits, that gives you a salary, and you get promoted over time. You build your expertise, so you have a steady income. Now, that could be as a teacher. That's what my parents were their entire careers. That could be, you could earn 3 or 4 times that. You could be a doctor, okay? There's a range of incomes, but here's the key. No matter, and by the way, they stayed in an intact marriage with 2 people working their entire careers. That's really critical. You want to know how to screw up your financial situation? Have a divorce whatever. That's pretty obvious, I think. So they stayed together. Both of them worked. But here's the key. Every single year of their lives, they started working, call it at age 20. They're both 82, 83 right now. So for 62 consecutive years, their income generally rose over time, but it had its ups and downs. But here's the key. They spent less than they earned after tax. And every year, they were a net saver every single year for 62 years. Now, they never once, to my knowledge, did they overextend on credit card debt or get themselves into a financial pickle. Yes, they took on debt in the form of a mortgage. So the only debt they ever took on in their entire lives was good debt, right? Long-term
Yeah,
fixed
that's a
rate,
smart
like
one.
mortgage debt, right? So they were the combination of building careers and then being incredibly frugal. My parents are laughably frugal. Like we never went out to restaurants when I was a kid. My mom always shopped secondhand stores. We spent money to do things as a family. We traveled like crazy. This 7 countries in 6 days. Actually, if you knew how I grew up, it wouldn't be that unusual. But here's the thing: when we traveled across the country every summer, we did it in a little Volkswagen camper and stayed at $10 a night campgrounds. We weren't staying in luxury hotels, flying first class or whatever.
Right.
So, basically it wasn't just every year. It was like every day. My mom clipped coupons, and my parents scrimped and saved to make sure that they always spent less than they earned. So they were net savers. And then you work the magic of compounding over 62 years, where every year they weren't saving $100,000 a year, but they might be saving $2,000, $5,000. They were working as teachers, educators. They always worked for various different nonprofits, like not public. They only worked as public school teachers for a couple years early, when I was born. But they had their 401k or 403b in the nonprofit world. So they set aside pre-tax money every year that was compounding. So that's a really important step as well. Like, have your employer take retirement money out of your paycheck before you even see the money. Have them divert it into a retirement account. Ideally, your employers may be matching that a little bit, and then set it up as the default that it automatically is invested in the S&P 500. That should be the default. Then later, subscribe to our products and take a piece of it and try and beat the market. But the default should be just stick it in the S&P 500.
So let's take it from there, though, because I want to take a second. That's great advice. That's great personal finance advice.
Yes.
But you've also been now, like me. I mean, I think I started in the stock market in 1993. Oh shit, 31 years. You're right there with me. If you had someone come to you, and we get a lot of these people, right? You ran Case Learning prior to founding Empire. And you had a lot of young people come to you and say, I'm interested in the markets. Right. If you then, so let's take what you just said there, save what you, save, spend less than you earn,
you're a net saver
save,
every year,
compound, all the personal finance, don't take on excess. I'm with all of that. Now, though, let's say that you also have, instead of the 82-year-old, you get the 28-year-old says, Whitney, you've been in the stock market for 3 decades. Give me 3 things, three hard and fast, not hard. I hate saying hard and fast. 3 guiding North Stars that I should think about with investing. What would those 3 things be for the stock market?
Yeah, well, look, there is no shame in just indexing it and going on with your life. Okay. And for my parents, that was a good option. But here's the thing. Along came me. I was starting a hedge fund, and they took a third of their money and they put it with me to try and do better than the market. And lo and behold, I did. So finding somebody else to either advise you in the form of a newsletter like what you and I do, or it's very hard to pick active money managers who are going to either a hedge fund or mutual fund. Okay, but sometimes I know people who met Warren Buffett back in the 1950s, and they're worth hundreds of millions of dollars today because they were able to see investment genius, right?
Can I say something about what you just said, though, too? Because like you go to my Twitter profile, the first thing I have pinned are 10 books I have behind me, not just because it looks good, but like my financial library. I went to Wharton undergrad. I learned all this stuff. I mean, it's great and all that. But I actually learned the most about finance and investing from reading those 100 books and the 10 books I have there. And what I think is really unique about what we do, what you and I have built, is like I try to take that 100 books plus my 30 years of experience and put it into an 800-word like essay that someone can read and enjoy. And like, so I think it's I find great advice and follow it.
Yes.
It's hard to do. And we're talking our own book, but I think both Stansberry and HX are great advice.
Yes.
But I honestly, it's along with reading those books, our newsletters are the active version of reading the 100 books, where they kind of, I won't say do the work for you, everyone should do their own work, but they can certainly act as guides in, what can be a very difficult, endeavor in investing in stocks.
Yes. Well, here's the thing. Investing is hard. I view investing and investing successfully over time as a real skill that's akin to being a surgeon or a pilot or something like that. It's something that requires sort of training and expertise. And here's the thing. If you are going to do investing outside of index funds or whatever, try to beat the market, right? Go into it with some humility. Understand that statistically speaking, most people fail and most people shouldn't try to do it. If you are going to do it, you are going to need to develop your own expertise and or hire expertise. Pay a modest amount for you and me, and have not only do we give stock ideas, but day in and day out, you and I are writing dailies where we're teaching as well. So we're not only throwing people a fish, we're teaching them to fish.
Yeah, number one. Well, so I use that all the time, because I'll say one other thing though too with the newsletters, and I said this before. There's the saying that I think it was from Jesus. I'm Jewish, I don't know, but like if you give a man a fish eats for a day, you teach him to fish, he can eat for the rest of his life. I sort of say with our newsletters, we teach you to fish so you can fish for the rest of your life, but we also give you a fish because we give the investment ideas, and so it's even better. Okay, so number one, find great advice, advisors, mentors, read the 100 books. That's one of three. What are the other two that you're going to give to folks?
Well, look, then generally it's almost like not what you should do, but what you must avoid doing, right? So there's a collection of things of using leverage, getting sucked in, human emotions, by the way. Another element of approaching, if you are going to invest beyond index funds and just forget about it, is you have to understand that 99% of human beings human brains are wired to do all the wrong things when it comes to investing. Chasing bubbles, following the herd, panicking and selling right at the bottom, et cetera, et cetera. So you need to study the behavioral side of investing and understand the emotional side. That would be critical. And then I guess the third sort of big thing is you got to think long term. Now, look, I'm not opposed.
Okay, can I build off number? Can I build off number two for a second though? Because we have I like my stupid fucking catchphrases, and this one I actually got from Gabe, which has been around the street for a while, is plan the trade and trade the plan. And, I'd almost say that the first thing we talked about, finding great advice, educating yourself, that's planning the trade. And when I say trade, I don't mean trading. I mean investing. It's plan the investment and invest the plan.
What's your strategy?
Figure out what your strategy is. Understand that sometimes strategies will have weaknesses and know how to respond. Everyone's got a plan until they get punched in the face, is the Mike Tyson quote. And that single saying, plan the trade and trade the plan, there's so much in there. It says so much about actually thinking about what you're doing and why you're doing it and coming up with contingencies. But then most important to the behavioral science, what you said, actually fucking do it. It's so hard. Again, you get punched in the, every boxer who's trained is being trained that gets punched in the face, what he's supposed to do. It's not until you get punched in the face though that you actually have to do it. So I'll take what you said, say plan the trade, trade the plan. And I interrupted you on number three. Go ahead.
Well, let me also say, I've been to Ukraine a couple times and tried to go. I was supposed to be in Ukraine yesterday until the Moldovans got in the way.
Well, this might be a case where your plan, I don't know, the the drones into Moldova idea, I got to question a little bit, my friend, but that's okay.
It's not quite as crazy as it seems, given I've brought hundreds of drones already to Ukraine on previous trips, but I went through Poland. Turns out, it's not like this wasn't something I'd done before. I really wasn't anticipating a lot of trouble. I only had 17 with me. I've brought 150 drones with me on another flight, right?
I know. I wanted to go with to go with you on one of those trips, but now I'm having second thoughts. Anyways,
but my point is, I also today in Israel, we went down to the southern part of Israel, and I was looking 1 mile away at Gaza, not just northern Gaza, central Gaza, where there were plumes of smoke. I was hearing booms of artillery, machine guns, and so why am I telling you this story? Is because there's another saying that the best laid plans, I'm forgetting the exact cliche, but in war, the plans are all great until the first contact with the enemy, and then everything goes out the window, right? Yeah. Same thing. So it's the same thing as big, like Mike Tyson. Everyone's got a great plan to get punched in the face. The point is that there's like wartime, like in the boxing ring, the investing world is always full of surprises, and many of them are unpleasant. Yeah. And if you're going to go into that ring, into that battlefield filled with, in the investing world, filled with, people with high IQs and Harvard Business School degrees and supercomputers. Now you're competing against the computers as well, and AI.
The machines.
Okay,
you're competing against the AI.
If you're going to go into that ring, you'd better be prepared in terms of your knowledge and have a plan, but also emotionally and all. So I would argue for the most individual investors, let me just make point number 3, and then you can respond. The third most important thing is look, if you're going to be a short-term trader, be a short-term trader and follow your trading product, right? And have someone help you. I think the vast majority of people, for the vast majority of their money, should be uber long-term investors. I'll point to a study of Fidelity. Some researchers went in and looked at like 1 million accounts at Fidelity. You want to know the accounts that had the highest return? Dead people.
The ones that didn't
trade.
Dead
people.
Dead people.
Okay? It was people who had died and the heirs hadn't gotten around to liquidating the account yet. In other words, zero trading of an account that was already invested, so it wasn't sitting in cash. Those accounts, because again, all the studies ever show is that most people, most trades, they are destroying value. They're selling winners too early, et cetera, et cetera. Yep. So I did that as a hedge fund. I look back on my 18-year career. My biggest mistakes, the most costly financial mistakes were I had done the work. I had identified a great company. I knew Reed Hastings personally. I bought Netflix at the bottom. The company was growing at 40% a year. And then, one day I got dumb and sold half of it. And then another 6 months later, I got dumb again and sold another half and whatever. So if you're going to have, for most people, the plan should be to be very long-term oriented. But you better stick to that plan, and you got to buy good quality companies, of course. It doesn't do any good to be a long-term investor to own WeWork or something like that.
You and I know each other, very well. We've worked together for a half a decade. We can finish each other's sentences. I don't think you did what you just did intentionally, but our other big saying is trade a lot or don't trade at all. Is that like, if you're going to be a trader, trade, and that's what we do. But in our long-term products, I'm like, you just got to chill, and you got to get the great raw material. We like either big growth or big discounts to like asset value, like a big gap between potential and current reality. But then, you need to do nothing, and it's, I'll tell you one thing. Professionals, we created something in my hedge funds where we called it, because we had multiple pods, especially at Stadia. We had a bunch of them. We created what we called steady state portfolios, where we would take a snapshot of the first of the month, then we would look at the end of the month and say, what would happen if you did nothing? Did you do better or did you do worse? And until we installed that, the vast majority of these are professional money managers, guys with degrees that have, made billions of dollars. They underperformed. So these are people whose entire living, their entire career is focused on it, and they're underperforming. Right. So, if you find yourself in the middle, that's the worst place to be. Trade a lot or don't trade at all. HX Trader, HX Income, or Stansberry Investment Advisor and HX
Right.
Legacy, and just don't get caught in the
Right.
middle. I
So
think
so let me just tell
is
you,
great
like
advice.
today, you don't have to, by the way, do all one or all the other. Like today, I got, I don't know, half my
Yeah,
long-term money parked in the S&P 500 index. That's always my default. Then every once in a while, like once every 6 months, now that I'm not managing anybody else's money, there's no pressure. I come across a stock. Now I'm restricted in that I cannot own anything we recommend for conflict of interest reasons, which sort of bums me
same
out.
here. We do the same thing.
But
Yeah.
every once in a while I come across an unusual thing that just doesn't fit in any of our newsletters, or we haven't gotten around to recommending it yet, because we always have an archive of great ideas but we only send out one a month for each of our newsletters. And I'll put I probably own, I don't know, 8 or 10 stocks with the other half of my money, and so it's sort of like half index, half with the other. And maybe over time I'll see which whether my stock picking, which I'm doing very part time and only with my secondary
Yeah.
ideas, it may turn out that that's a bad idea, in which case I'll just index the whole damn thing. My advice to the average person out there is take your long-term money. Only long-term money should be in the market. That's at least 3 years, if not 5 years, ideally in a
Yeah.
retirement account. So
Yeah.
you're looking at 40 years for young people, right? Um, Index it all as the default. Then take a piece of it and do some stock picking and be active with it. And but
Yeah.
don't bet the farm. And try and buy some blue chip stocks, and give it some time. And if it turns out you can find 5 or 10 stocks, like you don't want to take half your retirement money and put it in your 1 or 2 favorite stocks. If you're going to do it with any meaningful amount of money, you have to be at least diversified. Let's say in 10 stocks, right? Which is sort of what I've
Yeah.
done. I'm half index in 500 stocks and half in 10
Look,
stocks.
the reality is, I think our readers, our audience, and this is a great thing. They like
Yeah,
investing. They like the education. I
yeah,
look, we do. Why are we doing this? We could do any number of
sure,
things. We do it because we love the markets,
sure.
and I think that's a great thing. I think it's the greatest intellectual competition that's ever been created in the history of
Yep.
man. Believe it or not, while there's certainly some unfair aspects to it, I think that it is a level playing field, especially. And look, I think these are three great ideas: educate yourself, find great advisors,
Avoid the
come up with a
idiocy.
plan,
Yes.
stick to that plan, and
Avoid the idiocy and
and
invest long term. Make sure long term.
yeah, invest long term. So I want to say, lastly here, I want to say thanks, Whitney. I appreciate you coming on. It's been a great opportunity to work with Porter. I mean, again, what he's done with Stansberry. Obviously, I learned a lot in the hedge fund world or in the investing world across 25 years. There are incredible things. You should ask the people that work with me on my team today how many times I reference Porter and the things that make Stansberry. I want to thank you as well. And look, we're still working together all the time. And I want to say, lastly, to all the Empire Financial, subscribers that are watching this, thank you. Your support means everything to us. HX is not a big company; it's me and a couple friends. But what your support at Empire, your support here, this is a mission for us. This isn't, it's a job, but it's a mission. It's a community. It's a culture. We want to really put people, and I think Whitney said it best, put you in a position to feel empowered and achieve financial security. That's really, it's a gift to be able to do that for people every day. So, Whitney, any last words before we sign off
No, I'll
here?
just echo what you said, Enrique. Both of us obviously love the game, and I think we're both in our sweet spot. One of the great satisfactions of doing what we do, I think, is we're connecting with so many like average folks like your parents, my
Yeah, yeah,
parents, who aren't multiple Ivy League degrees and high flying bazillionaires or whatever. It's much more satisfying to sort of help average folks, not only do well for themselves, but I would argue equally importantly, you and I do a pretty good job of warning people
yeah.
about all the dangers out there and just things to avoid, because that's half the game.
Well, I'll tell you this one last one. We didn't spend enough time on it. I'll give you this one last little anecdote. When I started at Lehman Brothers, so I first worked at Lehman way back in like '92. maybe 93. And there were still partners at Lehman. And it was my last day. It was a summer job. It was a summer job. I was walking across. One of the partners at Lehman said, "Hey, come with me." A guy named Brad Jack, bless his soul. He passed away a few years ago. And we're walking along, and he had some words of wisdom. And one of his words of wisdom is, he said, "Just stay alive. Just stay alive in this game, and great things are going to come to you." And, Porter says, just don't blow up. And I think it's great advice, because if you've got a good plan, and look, there's going to be moments in time where you're going to have stress, you're going to have losses. I mean, losses are a part of the game. But just stay alive. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Look forward to talking to you a lot more. Whitney will be a guest again, I assure you. And thank you for your support. And we look forward to speaking with you all very soon.